So people seem to respond pretty well to the tier list that I'd made before of the best classes to hit rank 1 legend with. So I wanted to extend this now to some different classes and their archetypes. So today, the focus being aggro decks. Where do I rank each class with their best aggro deck? But I want the criteria to be a little bit different. I don't want to talk about rank 1 legend. Instead, my criteria for this ranking is if you were to play this deck for the entire season, how do I think you would finish? So this is a lot different just in that some decks are really going to be great against, top tier decks, and they're kind of viable for going for that rank 1 spot. But other decks are just good enough to maybe get you to legend. Maybe they're just fun to play at different rank floors or something like that. But I think saying that every single deck here will be played for the entire season, we're going to have to consider all the possible matchups since you can't really just snipe particular pockets of the meta. So all that being said, out of the way, we're going to start here with Priest. No surprise, Priest. Aggro Priest. It's the worst class in the game, I think, across the board. And this is its worst archetype. So Triple F really fits it. I don't even know what this deck would look like. I think the only obvious includes would be Double Mind Blast. It's kind of the only tool Priest has to be aggressive. But its hero power really has no synergy with your ability to heal up minions that are low curve. They're probably not going to survive. None of the other Priest minions really fit into that aggressive style. You got Northshire Cleric on 1. Akanai on 4 gets you a little aggressive, but you need like 6 mana to get a 3/5 body that can deal 2 damage to their face. It's just, there's really no tools there to help aggro Priest. Probably not even worth talking about. No surprise that it's on the bottom of this list. But I don't think anything else is quite that bad. I've got Warrior and Druid here at D. Now, I think with both an aggro, Warrior, and Druid, it's going to be tough to hit Legend. I don't know that you can't do it, but even with the best lists, yeah, quite difficult. Now, what does the list look like? I think with Warrior, for sure you're leaning into weapons, so things like Arcanite Reaper, although it's a question of whether or not it's a 1 of or a 2 of. I've seen lots of variants. Maybe there's upgrades in there, maybe there's Greenskin, but you're probably using that weapon synergy with things like Bloodsail Raider, Bloodsail Corsair, potentially even Captain's Parrot to draw those, because you do need a bit of card draw in here. Otherwise, you got like Korkrons, Frothing Berserkers, Inner Rage, Warsong Commander, also a bit of a question mark. I don't think it's going to be in there. Raging Worgen, a possibility, although without charge in the full combo, it's kind of difficult to pull it off with any kind of aggression there. So I don't think there's a real defined tight list for that, but that's generally what it's going to be, this kind of beat down and slightly higher curve than maybe some other aggressive decks that top out at, that Arcanite Reaper, potentially even Grom. I think when I play Aggro Warrior, I'd like to have Grom in there, especially with like an Inner Rage activator. At least you've got executes to get through some big taunts. But you're probably not running shield slams or anything like that. So not as much removal as you're used to. And it's just going to be those those bodies with kind of enrage effects or weapons and their synergies. But I don't think it's really good against anything in particular, matchup-wise. Probably just going to struggle across the board. And that's why I've got it so low. If you're playing it over the whole season, you get a decent smattering. I'm not even really sure what you're going to be great against. Maybe Miracle Rogue being sort of one of the better matchups in that they can't do anything to prevent you from pushing a lot of damage with your weapons. So especially if you're able to upgrade them, maybe it's an okay matchup. But I think across the board, pretty weak. But when it comes to Druid, we did see recently kind of an aggro style, a little bit that leans into Zoo. Saw a couple variations on ladder, tried some out myself. You're able to use things like Young Priestess, potentially even like Jungle Panther, your regular knife jugglers with Power of the Wild. Harvest Golem can be very powerful, and you can spam a lot of that out onto the board with something like Innervate, right? If you get those early Innervates with the Power of the Wild, can be really, really strong. Even Swipe, I think, is an okay card to have in there. Maybe you're running Keepers, probably not. Potentially Druid of the Claw, mostly just for the charge effect. But I think it's kind of topping out there around that 4 or 5. I've played it. It felt okay at times. Felt not so good at times. Felt like maybe it should be more of kind of a mid-range thing. Yeah, maybe it's got to lean more into that Zoo style of board control over just being like very, very quick minions you're getting out with Argent Squire, probably running Lepernomes, that kind of thing. But I don't think it's as bad as you would think it actually. Playing against it a couple times. I think Imp Masters were in there at least for a while. Playing against it, I've gotten absolutely steamrolled just because Innervate and Power of the Wild can be so, so powerful. But I've also played it, and it can just feel like complete dead draws. You get a bit of draws from things like Loot Hoarders. But yeah, it just, most of the cards that Druid is running aren't really conducive to that kind of aggressive style. But it's certainly playable. Certainly playable. Would be hard to push to Legend, I think. Now above that, I've got Mage. Now I don't think Aggro Mage is great. I put it in the C tier. Maybe it's like a C minus kind of thing. Just slightly better than those two. But I think it's probably possible to get to Legend if you put in the time. It is a deck that can absolutely snowball out of control. So what does it look like? Usually you've got Mana Worms, Mirror Image to set up taunts to prevent anyone from attacking your early minions on board. It's also going to be able to buff those Mana Worms. Sorcerer's Apprentice with like your Frost Bolts and Fire Bolts. Very, very effective if it all just kind of works out, right? Probably a Lepernome as well. I think almost an auto-include in every aggro deck here. But if you don't have things work out perfectly, it feels really, really awful. So you can out-tempo sometimes. You get that Mana Worm, Sorcerer's Apprentice with the Mirror Image, with the reduced cost, and then snowball that into spells as your worms getting buffed. Maybe they don't have removal. It's crazy when it all works out. And fireballs are even fine as like board removal, right? You can kill a 4/6 Druid of the Claw on 4, or potentially even cheaper with that Sorcerer's Apprentice. But yeah, as soon as you lose that kind of tempo, that early aggression, it's pretty flat after that, and you're just sitting there hoping to draw enough burn to send at your opponent. Like, have you dealt 25 points of damage? Well, maybe you're okay. Maybe they can't heal back above that, and you can just draw your burn and send it to their face. But you're on a very quick clock after that. Its matchups are pretty weak against your standard like Druid and Warrior, just because it doesn't have that much reach. They've got the ability to heal, set up taunts. Druid can answer your early aggression with an early innervated minion, which will really swing things out of your favor. And it's also very, very bad against Zoo. Usually you can't out-tempo a Zoo. I feel like you almost need the coin in that matchup with the Mana Worm and like an Arcane Missiles that goes your way or something. It definitely can happen, and you can snowball it out of control. But Zoo will, on average, over the course of a whole season, just absolutely overtake the board and give you no chance, even if they're tapping and hurting themselves in the process. You're unlikely to deal enough damage. For sure, it's nice against, again, Miracle Rogue, kind of being able to kill them before they're able to get combos off. It's just kind of okay against other stuff across the board. That's why I think yeah, maybe you could hit Legend. Probably just with enough time and things kind of going your way, it's fine. But yeah, no like super favorable matchups that I've found with the list in my time playing it anyway. Above that, I'm going Hunter and Shaman. Hunter, right? Face Hunter. I think we've all seen a lot of it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It does fall flat against those decks that have good sustain, good removal answers. So again, I think Warrior and Druid tend to just outclass it. They can heal, they can set up taunts, and yeah, you've got things like Hunter's Mark, maybe Kill Command to use on those big taunts, those big minions. But you don't have too many pieces of removal, and generally, after they get 2 or 3 taunts down, you're just kind of stonewalled, hoping your hero power, hoping any direct damage you can send to their face is going to be enough. But they do a very, very good job of mitigating your threats. But otherwise, it just does such a good job of being able to kill your opponent through taunts in a lot of matchups. So stuff like Handlock, it's just crazy favorable because your hero power is so effective at aiding what you're trying to do as an aggro deck. Very, very fast against something like Miracle Rogue. And it's not bad against other things that are trying to go wide. You know, a mid-range Shaman, it's okay. Zoo, it can be okay, right? You've got those explosive traps to kind of deal with those weaker bodies, and Unleash the Hounds can be good for either some board control or just because their goal is to flood the board. A lot of times you just get a lot of direct damage to their face or a lot of card draw, which is going to mean more burn. So pretty effective cards in the class for actually aiding your kind of aggro goals, and the hero power quite good for it. But it's definitely stonewalled by a lot as well, which is why I've got it in the B tier. But I think the best thing, maybe my favorite thing, I guess, for Face Hunter is that the games are so fast, even faster than with other aggro decks. So I think it's a really, really nice deck for just jumping into a new ladder season with. When you have those like crazy amounts of bonus stars, you just want to get up to Plat, Diamond, or something on your first day. Very easy to do that in just a couple hours, and then you can switch to something that's maybe a bit more consistent. But yeah, pretty good, not the best. Aggro Shaman, I think, is in a similar place. Can be very good against Miracle Rogues. You know, running a Lava Burst, having that direct damage to go through taunts makes it very good against things like Handlock. It still falls flat against the same, right? Your Warrior, your Druid, that kind of thing. But it's a deck that can really, really snowball in your favor as well, right? You've got the option of using things like Rockbiter Weapon for early removal to keep your minions on board. So maybe you're playing an Argent Squire, a Leper Gnome, an Abusive Sergeant, right? All these things that kind of work in Aggro Shaman. But you just need 1 mana to bop a Knife Juggler on top of it. And then you can start pushing a lot more damage with Flame Tongue and, yeah, get that into your Lava Burst. But it's also a little bit more flexible in that it's got this sustained damage from Doomhammer, which you're typically running 2 copies of. And you have the ability to save that Rockbiter for Doomhammer if you feel like you need that Wind Fury boost for that extra sustain. So I think it ends up doing better against things that require that sustained damage. So something like Warrior, which isn't often setting up a lot of taunts, but is instead just dealing very effectively with small and mid-sized minions on the board. You can just chip away with your Doomhammer again and again, turn after turn, and then eventually burst them down with Rockbiter late in the game. And something like that, I think, really separates it from a lot of the other aggro decks. It kind of gives it that, that little extra punch that I think is lacking in a ton of aggro decks in classic Hearthstone anyway. So I got it up there with the Face Hunter. Definitely some real favorable matchups, and a little bit of flexibility in how you play it that I think really helps. Right above that, we're looking at Rogue and Paladin. So Rogue, what does that look like? I like Backspace Rogue. I think it's the most prominent aggro rogue for sure, or it's at least some variety of that. You're looking at, Arcane Golems. It's got Fairy Dragon. It's got Assassin's Blade with Deadly Poisons, SIs as well. But what I really, really like about this deck is it's another one where I think it offers a lot of flexibility in how you play it. Sometimes your SIs are going to be there for board removal because, 2 damage takes out a lot of those early minions, or it can finish something off. Your hero power as well, very good at chipping away at small minions. It can use sap to get rid of big taunts, but you can also just, send a lot of damage. It can be very, very aggressive. Stuff like Celsi Deckhand and Arcane Golem, just great chargers to do a lot of damage right away. What else has it got? Loot Hoarders, just, kind of standard early game aggression, but you do have a lot of nice decisions. Do I play this Arcane Golem now? Give them the mana? In certain matchups, it's just a bad idea. Am I going to give Druid extra mana? Probably not, because now they're going to keeper my Arcane Golem immediately after, start dropping big taunts, and I don't have the stat for it. So, okay, I'm going to save it as a finisher, maybe with a Cold Blood, something like that. But in other matchups, you're actually able to safely give a Paladin a lot of times, a little bit of extra mana. Why not? The Paladin's still going to struggle to remove your board. That 4 damage on curve can be very, very good. And a 4-2 potentially even difficult to deal with. So it's a super strong deck. It'll get you to Legend, and you can climb high with it. Blade Flurry as well, I think. Whether it's on the Assassin's Blade or your hero power, as long as you've got a Deadly Poison on it, it's a really, really nice card for sort of re-securing the board, or just pushing a bunch of damage and making sure you survive for another couple turns, right? If you're up against a Zoo player, it can be an absolute game changer. Just save your life for a bit, stall out for another turn or two for you to get some more draws, push a bit more damage, and if they're forced to tap or they've been tapping, their life total, it's going to be pretty low. And something like that, really, really useful. So great aggro deck. I think it's a lot of fun to play. Highly recommend it if you want something different than Miracle Rogue, because it just has a different feel, and it has a bit of a different feel, I think, from other aggro decks. So very, very effective, very good. And Aggro Paladin, I think as well. Very, very good deck. Great for climbing. It's kind of up there with Face Hunter as far as game speed. I find the games go very, very quickly. But what I like about it, what separates it, I think, from other aggro decks, is it's very good at dealing with stuff like Druid. Because you're running double equality, you're able to get through these taunt walls, either with spells or with like 1/1 minions, with knives from your knife juggler. Extremely good at doing that, and Divine Favor is just such a strong tool against control decks. Something like Warrior can be really, really difficult to deal with because you need a lot of sustain in the deck. And at a glance, just running things like Argent Squire, Blessing of Might, Knife Juggler, it's like, I'm not going to have enough damage to really sustain the match. But if you're drawing like 5 cards off of a Divine Favor, which sometimes the Warrior just can't play around, it could get you into another Divine Favor for even more sustain, or that 5 cards. I mean, it's a lot of cards to get you a lot of extra damage very, very quick. So it's got the ability to win against pretty much anything. Equality as well, like we're talking Handlock. This doesn't have the ability to deal as much direct damage to your opponent's face through taunts, but it allows you to get your minions through taunts pretty well. Avenging Wrath, along with Equality 2, secures a fair bit of damage on your opponent's face, which I think is really worth noting. So a lot of times on like 6 mana, you might just play an Avenging Wrath against 1 minion or on an empty board just to push damage. And then if you make it up to 8 mana, which is definitely possible in a lot of these games where you're playing Divine Favor, where you're required to push further against a Warrior or something like that, then it can be an equality Avenging Wrath, where you take out a couple minions on the board, and then you're pushing another 5 or 6 damage to their face just to kill them. Also, True Silver, a very underrated aggro card. I mean, it's just such a good card to begin with, but representing 8 possible damage, and it's only over 2 turns. Again, with Divine Favor, you can get rid of 1 True Silver very quickly, into your second True Silver, begin swinging with that. It's a really, really strong deck to climb with. I think you can get pretty high on ladder with it. Not the top of Legend, but I wouldn't be surprised if you can get around that top 100 Legend mark, if this is all you were going to play. Now, finally, I'm going Warlock. Now, disclaimer, I'm counting this as Zoo, but I also don't count Zoo as an aggro deck. I'm breaking my own rules, but I make the video, so suck it, deal with it. But there's a reason why I'm counting this as Zoo. In Hearthstone, people who like aggro decks tend to prefer to play Zoo more than people who prefer control decks in Hearthstone. So even though Zoo is a board control deck, right, if you're playing it at its highest potential, you're trying to secure the board, make sure you don't overextend, only send damage to their face when it's safe. If they do some kind of board clear, then you're able to kind of refill the board, re-secure it, send that damage to face again. But it feels more like an aggro deck than it does that kind of control style, where usually you have spells and weapons and things like that to mitigate the board, or you have these, when you're using spells, it's like this entire board clear versus like making small trades with minions. So that's the only reason I'm kind of counting it here. I think if you're looking at this video and you're thinking, oh, what do I want to play as an aggro deck? You're more likely to gravitate towards Zoo. But I will say Warlock, can also be played as just an aggro deck. So usually you've got like Wolf Riders, maybe it's like Bluegill. You could also have Argent Commander in there, a couple Power Overwhelmings. You can even go Murlocs if you want. It's a playable deck, but it's probably somewhere in the C tier. I would put it around where an aggro Mage is. Maybe you could hit Legend with it. It's going to be a bit of a struggle, but the hero power for Warlock is just so good at helping with, hey, I flooded the board with a bunch of early minions, let me refill. And I think that's kind of why it's the only class in Classic that could even attempt to make Murlocs work. It's just still not real good. But yeah, as far as Zoo goes, yeah, it's a board control deck, but it is so good. I think it's very underrated. I've said this a lot before because we see a lot of bots play it, and you see people play it as though it's an aggro deck. These are just getting funnier to me the more that I talk about it on this video. But people will put Leper Gnomes in. They'll just send all their damage to their opponent's face. It overextend onto the board and then get punished for it sometimes. And that's the thing. The deck is even effective if it's played as an aggro deck. It's probably about in this A tier if you just play it strictly as an aggro deck, because it's so good at pushing damage. Sometimes you're not going to be punished for it. You could just curve out, or you can refill your hand with the hero power. But to play it as effective as possible, yes, you want to secure the board. I think you want to include cards in it that aren't like Leper Gnome. I prefer Shield Bearer because it's going to help you secure that board. Works really well with buffs from things like Direwolf Alpha, Shattered Sun Cleric, all that kind of stuff. Defender of Argus even. And that's really the name of the game with the deck. It's value. Where are you getting the value the most? You've got things like Harvest Golem, maybe a buffed Harvest Golem, trading off small minions that sort of slide into your Direwolf to be able to make super effective trades, and then just you get so many cards replenished in your hand. It's really, really easy to get value out of the individual cards, and then it's really easy to just have sustained value from this draw. It's got good matchups against Druid. It's not bad against Miracle Rogue, which you're going to see at the top of the ladder. A little unfavored there. But you can even build the deck to be a little more catered to certain matchups. Power Overwhelmings in the deck will give you more burst. If you're expecting to face a lot of hand lock during the season, who knows what happens with bots being reported. I think we will see more of it. So maybe that would make its way into the meta of what a Zoo deck should be. But yeah, in pretty much every other matchup, let's see. I guess Control Warrior is going to be favored against Zoo. But yeah, against most of what you're going to see from other classes, at least the typical decks, I think it's going to be favored, or at least okay. If it's unfavored, it tends to be just barely unfavored, and you're going to certainly snag a lot of free wins. So you're going to end up around the top of the ladder, I think, playing Zoo. If you're playing it the whole season, you're not like climbing and then just sitting on your rank. I don't think you're going to make it as high as you will with some other archetypes. I think it's unlikely, at least. It's certainly a deck that can let you touch Legend Rank 1. But yeah, you might be looking at like top 50, top 30, something like that, if you play the deck perfectly around there. So those are my thoughts. Hopefully that was entertaining. I absolutely cheated you all out at the end, but I don't know. I think it's kind of funny. As much as I say Zoo's not an aggro deck, to just include it in the aggro deck thing. So once again, suck it. I'll be doing more of these for some of the other archetypes. Combo, mid-range, control, at least. Maybe we'll revisit some other kind of weird things like fatigue and mill, but I think it's going to be a lot harder. And now I'm babbling. So enjoy. Good luck on ladder. Play some aggro.